So if you're doing like something like code folding, you just have a comment inside the code block, or just like which would control the code folding. And I mean, it's nice because like even if that renders, that's fine. It's just a comment, So somebody copied the raw code and like paste it in their code base or whatever. The comment's not going to break the code. So it's a nice approach, and it reminds me in some ways of like some of the stuff that Shiki 2/, right? The library that kind of lets you do type annotations and stuff.
No, we use something similar. We like the same features, but it's not Shiki 2/. Yeah.
Let's dive into that a little bit, because you created your whole own syntax highlighting library. So why did you do that? And like, why didn't you just choose one of the off the shelf ones like Shiki?
Yeah, well, it's actually like Shiki and Lighter, which is the code highlighting library that I use for code hike. They are both like a layer above the VS Code syntax highlighter, so it's not a super big layer. Like it's small, so it's a small library, and yeah, I needed something custom because of the way I use annotations inside code blocks, which are comments. So I need to like process those comments at the syntax highlighting time. So yeah, that was the reason, and it's really good how Shiki, especially how Anthony Fu, which is the maintainer of Shiki now, he's very good at open source. So most of the improvements to Shiki, they are like separate packages, and so we can benefit from that too. And that's all because of how Anthony is so good at doing open source. It's like a machine. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah, there are those few people in the community that are just like powerhouses, and it's like, how do you do it? With a lot of help, that's the answer. So an interesting thing around Shiki, or around your code highlighter, Brighter, is it, or Lighter?
Lighter, yeah.
Lighter is it integrates with React server components, and Code Hike as a whole is very server components focused. And from what I saw from the outside, it felt like a lot of 1.0 was like, oh no, React server components came out. How does this change how we look at this problem? So how have you used React server components throughout these projects to make it easier?
Yeah, it was actually like one of the reasons to do the V1, because there were a lot of features that if I wanted to implement it without React Server components, I would have to do it in Rehype plugins or Remark plugins, which are plugins that run at build time. They are part of the Markdown pipeline. I don't want to get too specific, but now with React Server components, I can leave that to the user, because when you use Code, you only you use any React component you want to render the content, and that can also be a server component. So a big one is syntax highlighting. Like you can do whatever you want before or after syntax highlighting. Before V1, you need like to add configuration to the Remark plugin that does the highlighting, and it was kind of limiting the amount of things you can do. But now you can do whatever you want because it's your React component. I provide some examples. Like one of them is something similar to Shiki 2/, which is adding some TypeScript information to TypeScript code blocks. But yeah, there are a lot of use cases where you can take advantage of React Server components for content websites specifically.
Yeah, I built out my own like storybook replacement, and I found like at almost every turn, it's like, wow, this is easier and less intensive.
Yeah.
Markdown being a big one of them. Like before React Server components, Markdown in React components was a whole lot of not fun, just because it's like, I have a string of Markdown. How do I render that on the client? And then you get into huge libraries with lots of trade-offs. But when you like kind of pare that back and make it a server components thing, it's like, wow, I can actually throw out all those libraries and start thinking of things in primitives and like the libraries that those libraries used, and like suddenly the world opens up.
Yeah. Gives you a lot more flexibility. And it's also like it was kind of when they launched, when React Server Components it has this server, right, in the React Server component, that people are sometimes confused that you can also use them at build time. So it's not that you need a server, and that's great for content website, for static website, because you are using React to do things that otherwise you will have to know how to write a remark plugin or a rehype plugin, and it's just for the developer experience, just much better.
Yeah, I think that's still a big confusion in the React community, is like server components. Yes, there's a server, but the server could be the build server, and it doesn't actually mean that you need to be running a server all the time.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about a post that you had written semi-recently, The Curse of Markdown. And just sort of like, maybe you can just sort of reframe the story that you're telling here, because I think it's really fascinating. Yeah, you want to tell us about The Curse of Markdown?
So, when you have a new technology or a new medium, you usually have like three phases. The first phase is when you, like, people copy things from before, from old media or old technologies. Like, for example, when the first year of TV, it was just radio shows, or the first car was a horse cart without the horse. I don't know. So that's like the skeuomorphic phase, right? That where you are copying things from the past. Then you have like an exploration phase where people start exploring new ways of doing things, new formats, and most of them fail, but some of these formats like stick. And you have like the last phase where you have like more like formats more native to the new medium, right? Like taking advantage of these new like tools or medium, or and uh, like well we talked before, like the content websites are most content websites are like in the first phase, right? It's kind of the same as you open any content website, it's mostly like a book or a magazine. And I blame Markdown for that. And that's what I call it, the curse of Markdown, because Markdown is so good that people don't want to leave it and do different things. So the trade-off between the cost of doing something and the benefits of doing it with Markdown, since the cost is so slow because it has so good tooling and it's so simple to use, we stayed in the safe place of this skeuomorphic phase where we copy all media, and well, this takes to what I talked before about the limits of Markdown, and what can we do to make it more like usable for building like richer uh, presentation of content. So yeah, that's what I call the curse. Like, that Markdown is so good that it isn't letting us explore new ways of doing things.
Yeah, I think going back to, again, looping back to a conversation earlier, part of it is the expressivity that is sort of missing out. So Markdown is famously not standard. There's like GitHub flavored Markdown, and there's like a bunch of other like kind of types of Markdown. Of course, now we have MDX components in Markdown. So I wanted just to talk briefly about your thoughts on like Markdown standards and portability. So it's like as you're adding new components to CodeHike that might require some extra, it's like, oh, you have to add this after the language in the code fence, or you have to add this comment, or you need to add this like special bang bang, or like whatever it may be. It's like, how do you sort of like work through the trade-off of like extra syntax to get to this like richness that you ultimately want?
Yeah, so that's a like a real problem, or even a real reason for not using CodeHike, because you are using like this non-standard annotation. Well, nothing is standard right now, but portability is one of the reasons that why Markdown is so good. That's why I mentioned I tried. My priority was to add the minimal changes to Markdown, or minimal annotations to achieve what I wanted, and also to make them easy to search and replace in case needed, and also don't break any tooling that already use Markdown. So it's not ideal, but I mean we took some measurements to avoid problems. But Markdown is so popular that it has so many flavors that it's just part of it now.
It must be hard.
I considered using a different extension too, but that will mean a lot of work to make tooling work too. So we are here.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think this landed out in a good place, though, right? You made some really good trade-offs, and this is just a part of the story. So it's like, if you were to go down the MarkDoc road and you're like, I'm going to make a new, markup language, then you have to like convince everyone that they should use it, and then you have to write all the tools and the LSP and all the other stuff and do all the marketing and the mind share, and it's like, you just like want to make good, rich document experiences, not like boil the ocean.
Yeah, true.
It must be hard to walk this line in some cases, though, because it's probably very tempting sometimes to be like, oh, I want this experience, and I'm kind of like trapped with exclamation points and comments. Has there ever been a time where you've wanted to go over that line, but had to pull yourself back?
At first, like before, like I took a very long time before B1 to define what I really wanted. So I kind of already know all the things I want. There are some things that I haven't added yet, but I have like I know how to add them because I already planned them. So there isn't like now is not that I think, oh, I want to add this stuff. Like I try like a lot of different syntaxes, a lot of ways, and I'm really happy. Well, not really happy, but from all the options, this one is the one that makes me happier. And it's already has all the features I need.